Hi, I'm John Refrano for Boris TV, and welcome to the Boris Continuum Complete for Vegas Pro Training Series. In this episode, we're going to take a look at BCC Lens Flare. Lens Flare is an interesting little plugin that goes way beyond just adding simple lens flares to your video. As you can see from this little demo I put together, you can get stars and supernovas and gas and all sorts of things going on. So it's kind of an exciting little plugin, as well as I'm going to show you how to use track motion as you're looking in this video right now. All right, let's get started. There are two kinds of lens flares. If you look in the BCC OpenGL, there's lens flare and lens flare advanced. I'm going to show you both. I'll start with a simple lens flare. When you just need a simple lens flare, this is kind of the go-to plugin here. I'm going to drop that on my media, and you can see the default lens flare has come up in the preview window. And there's a couple of presets here. There's an alternate default. I'm going to go down. There's a bright prime and a big bright zoom. Then there's a normal default that you get, and I'm just doing down arrow key here. There's a standard 105 prime lens, a 35mm prime, and a 3300 zoom, right? So it emulates a couple of lenses. Now, in the advanced plugin, you have full control over these. So the simple lens flare plugin is just when you want a basic lens flare in your video. But let me show you the overall parameters here that are common to both the standard and advanced version. You've got a global intensity. The global intensity just intensifies. You can see you can blow it all the way out to white. Just intensifies the lens flare. And then of course there's a scale under here so you can scale it bigger. So scaling is bringing it up, and intensifying is intensifying all parameters. The neat thing about this is when you start to set up your other parameters and you just want to bring it up or make it a little more intense, you go to the global settings and you don't have to tweak a whole bunch of settings. You can just go to the global settings and make it more intense. And we're going to use that when we keyframe it in a little bit. The next set of parameters here is the light source. So that is where the light is coming from. You can see it's in the upper left-hand corner, but you could move it all the way around the screen. This is another great parameter to keyframe. As you're moving, you move your light source and you do some keyframing here. We'll just keep it there for now. I'm going to show you that in conjunction with this parameter, which is the pivot point. You'll notice as I move this back and forth, it's really pivoting around a point that's right about there. And I can take that pivot point and move it. So now I can move it out to the side, and now it's pivoting from the side. So I have full control over where this pivots from and where the light source is. And that's pretty good for just your basic lens flare effect. There's an overall color. If you keep it white, you'll get the colors of the lens flare coming through, but you can also sort of colorize it. So if we move this into the red zone, and then we can come up through our colors, and you'll see the whole flare is kind of colorized with that color. So if you needed the flare to really be all one color, you would use this color parameter. If you wanted to change the individual colors, you'd use the advanced version, which I'm going to show you in a minute. And then you can change the various lens types from a 50 to 300 or a 35 or a 105 prime lens. You'll see on the prime lens you get less reflection. And then there's some settings for the alpha channel. What I want to do is just use this. I want to go to this alternate default, set that back up, and I just want to keyframe this in the video just to show you some quick keyframing. So this is a video of clouds passing by, and at some point here the clouds kind of move over the source, and of course the source we want to be behind the clouds. So I'm going to find an area where the clouds start to get close to that source, and then I'm going to keyframe the intensity. So I click on my animate button, and that gives me a keyframe for intensity, and I will drop a keyframe right here to say at this point I want to start changing the intensity, and then maybe once it gets right there I want the intensity to be all the way down to 0, so I'm going to make that 0. Now let's watch how it looks. There are the clouds coming through, and then it kind of goes down to 0. Right? You could use a little bit of masking so that it masks around the cloud, but you kind of get the idea of how you can use the intensity with keyframing to alter the lens flare. All right, let's move on to the next one. I've taken a little piece of generated media here and used the noise texture to make kind of a star field background. And the reason I've done this is because I want you to really see the colors in the advanced lens flare without any other backgrounds modifying those colors. So I'm just going to take the BCC advanced lens flare and drop it on here. So there you can see the default preset coming up, and it really pops nice against that black background, which is why I wanted to use it. You'll find that it starts out just like the simple lens flare. We've got global intensity and scale, we've got our light source and our pivot that we can play with. But now, each one of these elements can be individually controlled. So I've got my flare here, and you can see the flares happen to be red. I can turn the flare off, and I just get the other element. So each one of these can be turned on and off. I've got a red flare, but if I wanted to move it into the blue, I could get more of a blue flare in that background, and then I can change the ring color as well. Right, and there I've just changed it from kind of a red flare to a blue flare. You're going to find the same sets of controls again and again and again in all of these settings, which is actually a positive thing, because once you learn one, you kind of learn them all. We've got a flare intensity, so we can just intensify the flare, or we can just scale it, so you can scale it out, or you can make it bigger. You can control the intensity of the flare, and then you can control the position of the flare. So the flare does not have to be locked at one end. You can change the position of the flare all the way across. And so you see the flare moving here. I'm going to snap it back. And the same thing with the ring color. You can increase the intensity so we can see it a lot brighter over here, and then we can adjust the radius to make the ring bigger or smaller. Those are the flare settings. Then we have the rays. The rays are these little tiny rays coming out. So let me intensify them and scale them up right away so you can see them bigger. So now you can see the rays, and as a matter of fact, let me make them a little bit wider so they're kind of easier to see. Just a tad wider here. Okay. Again, you can change the position of the rays. The rays can happen anywhere along that line. You can also rotate the rays, and all of these can be automated. So you can automate the rotation of the rays and have them spinning around. You saw me change the width. It gets very wide. So you could change the width of them, and of course increase the count, the number of rays. And then there's these variances, and you're going to see these again and again on each of the settings. There's a scale variance so that the rays don't all have to be the same length. So here's where they're scaling, and there's a seed so that you can keyframe the seed to get some really nice effects. Or you can use that seed in case you have multiple of these in a project. You can start them seeded at a different place so they look different. And then there's a color variance. Right now, the rays are all the same color, and as I up the color variance, you see they kind of change in color, and again, I can change the seed here. Right? So lots of interesting things you can do with the rays. Let me turn the rays off for now. I'm going to go on to the fog. The fog isn't used in this one, but we'll just turn it on so you can see it. So it gives us a fog. Again, we've got intensity and scale. So intensity is how bright and dense that fog is going to be. Scale is how big it's going to be. And then you've got rotation, so you can kind of rotate it around. Lots of interesting effects can be done using the rotation and scale by keyframing the fog. Then there's polygons. That's these little tiny blue boxes that you see in here. Those are the polygons. And currently they're blue, but we can make them any color we want. So if we wanted to make them red or a purple, we can do that. And again, same sets of controls. Intensity for how bright they're going to be, scale for how big. Then the position along the axis here, so we can change the position as they slide up and back. You can rotate them, and there they are rotating on their individual axes. You can increase the count, just like you can with the rays, so you can get lots of them or just a few of them. And then you can control the polygon shape. So let me bring the scale up a bit. I'm sure you can see here, this is kind of a 5-sided, it's a pentagon, and you can change that to a hexagon, and then there'll be 6-sided polygons. We can adjust the spread for how spread out they are. And then once again, you've got a variance on the scale, so they can all be, when it's down to 0, they're all the same size. And then as you bring it up, they kind of vary in size, and you can change the seed for where they start to vary. Same thing with intensity. You could have them all the same intensity or bring them up, and some of them get brighter and some of them are darker, and you can play with the seed. Lots of great effects you can get by keyframing these, actually. Again, with the color variance. So they can all be the color that we set, or they can change color and a seed once again. So that's the polygons. Let me shut that off. I just want to bring you down through all these. Then there's the discs. The discs are these globes here, not these long hollows, but these globes here. And once again, you can change the disc color. You can see that color change. And then you can modify the intensity. I'm going to bring it way up in intensity so you can see the other things I'm doing. And scale the discs. You can position the disc wherever you want. You can have more of them. As you increase the count, you can increase the spread. Really lots and lots of control over every little aspect of this lens flare. And again, scale, variance, intensity, all the same as they are on the other ones. We turn this off. I think it's easier to see them as I turn each one of them off. Now we're going to go for these big hollows. And they're on, and they're currently white, but they don't look white. Or totally white, and that's because the color variance is up a bit. So if I bring them back, they'd be totally white, but because that color variance is up, they're varying a little bit in color. So white is just the base color. And then once again, you can increase the intensity, increase the scale, change the position, change the number with the counts, change the spread of how far apart they are. I mean, it almost looks like translucent planets coming by here. So lots and lots of great effects you can get by keyframing all these, in addition to mimicking common lenses and getting the lens flares. And once again, we have scale variance. They could all be the same size, or they can vary in scale. They could all be the same intensity or vary in intensity, and they could all be the same color or vary in color. I'm going to turn those off. We're just kind of dissecting this as we go down, and that leaves us with the glows, which are these little glows here. And again, the color's white, but the glows are different colors, which tells us that the color variance must be up, and sure enough it is. So if I turn it down, they're all white. As I bring it up, they change in color. They can change in the intensity, some of them brighter than others. I'll just go back up from the bottom. They can change in scale variability, as well as the position and the number. So you can get these, if you get these kind of close and spread them, you can get a really nice glowing blob in here. Lots and lots and lots of effects. Really just go in here and play with these, and you'll be amazed at some of the things that you come up with, right? Almost looks like kind of a Close Encounters of the Third Kind thing with all these little dots showing up. Let me turn that one off. Then there's a Chroma Hoop, which isn't turned on. These are kind of chromatic aberrations here. Let me up their intensity so you can see them. Right, so there's kind of the Chroma Hoop going on here, and again, you can change the scale of them. And once again, as you can imagine, the scale variance has varied widely on this one, right? So if I bring the variance down and I bring the scale down, then they're all the same scale. And as I bring the scale variance up, they become different sizes, but same sets of parameters: position, counts, spreading them out. So you can see there's just lots and lots of capabilities here. And the last one is the stripe, which I really like. This stripe is where you can really get kind of the supernova thing. As you intensify the stripe, it really kind of blows up really, really nicely. And you can control the length, so it doesn't have to be the entire length. So you can imagine keyframing these and having them grow out and then grow up and and out further. And kind of getting kind of cosmic explosions and things happening far beyond your regular lens flare. Okay, so those are all the things that you can do with the lens flare, in addition to looking at all the presets. And there are a lot of great presets. Let me just go through them. This is alternate default. There's the big fog that I used in the demo, big hoops, blue spike. I really like that one. Here's a bright light source. Here's a default that you get when you drop it on. Then we've got some 8-point foggy stars. We have an explosion here, which you can then keyframe further. So if I want this is the starting point, then I would go down on my stripe and I would increase the intensity, and get that thing to blow up even further. Let's continue from explosion with just a flare only. Really, really great presets. Green glow, multi-hoop, an orange light, starburst, subtle and foggy, sunspots, sunspot 2, sun with a corona, and a supernova, white light, and then finally a yellow burst. So let me show you how to use this kind of in a more practical non-space environment. I'm going to take this lens flare, and again I'm going to put the lens flare advanced on the scene. And if we look at the scene, it's just a pan across kind of a desert scene. And let me turn this off to begin with, and we pan across, and it's kind of this orangey light coming from somewhere, but we don't have that light in the scene, and I want to make it a little more interesting and get the light in the scene. So I'm going to put the lens flare in the scene, and then I want to keyframe it. So I'm going to go to the beginning of the event here, and what I've noticed is that this little mountain range top here is inside the frame at all times. So this is a good candidate to use for motion tracking. So let's go down to the motion tracker. I've motion tracked with you guys before. You come in, you do track on the fly. That gives you a little tracker to look at. And then we will go to the tracker center and center it right over this object here. I'm going to get it right down there. And then what we want to do is have Vegas play every single keyframe. And to get it to do that, we want to use a RAM preview. You could do that with Shift B, or just go to Tools, Dynamic RAM Preview, and it reminds you that it's Shift B, and it will start to track. Right? And it lost the track there, and that's okay. What we'll do is go back to the point at which it had the last good keyframe. So there's the last good keyframe. I'll make this longer again. Whenever you lose a track, you want to don't want to reset the tracker. You just want to clear the render cache, and then you want to do Shift B again and start tracking. And there it is tracking. Nice smooth track all the way across. And great, didn't lose it. So you can see I've got green all the way across here. I've got a nice smooth track. So now I want to turn off track on the fly, but you'll notice that immediately it doesn't do anything because I haven't applied that tracking to anything. So I want to scroll down, go to where it says apply, and I want to apply it to the light source. And now you'll see the light source is tracking our point. But I don't actually want to track that point. I want the light to be higher in the sky. So I'll go to the XY offset, and I'll change the Y to get it up a little higher. And then maybe we'll get it a little closer to the mountain here with the X. Right about there. And let's watch that. And there it is tracking across the sky. Now, one last thing we might want to do with the global intensity is, as it gets right in front of us, we might want to intensify it just for a moment. So let's go up to global intensity and turn on the animation, and then I want to place a keyframe right there, and then I want to move a little bit to one side, just right about there maybe, and add another keyframe. These are going to be my locking keyframes. So from the beginning to this point, I want the keyframe to be the same. Then I'm going to have it flare up here, and then come about the same on the other side, drop another keyframe. Now, the reason it's not adding the keyframe is because I'm working in such a small area. I have to select this here. Let me just show you this. Right, so BCC Lens Flare Advanced is a group, but I have to be on the actual track of keyframes of global intensity. That's why it wouldn't drop the keyframe. And so now I drop the keyframe. So I've got that other keyframe there. And now I want to select this middle keyframe, and I want to intensify it. Just get it to flare up a bit. And so now let's watch how this looks. It comes across. Just as it hits the center, it should flare up. Boom, flare, nice. And to the end. Well, that about wraps it up. Hopefully you've got a better understanding of how lens flare works and can use it in your next production. If you need more information, visit www.boriseffects.com. This is John Rafrano for Boris TV. Until next time, thanks for watching.